when I learnt about your work, and it was through, I interviewed James Flynn, the late James Flynn, who's an intelligence researcher, and he wrote a book called In Defense of Free Speech.
Oh, did he die?
Yeah, he died last year. He was 86. Yeah, he died. Yeah, it was. I was in communication with him. It was quite sudden.
Oh wow! Geez, I'm so sorry. Well, he was a really good guy.
Yeah, but I learned about the Grievancestudiesaffair through his book, and it reminded me of all of this literature I'd read about postmodernism and social constructionism back in my undergraduate degree. And so I started to read Foucault, and I found one place where we really agree, which is where he says that the methods of natural sciences, such as physics, biology, and chemistry, translate imperfectly, or like there's an imperfect translation to disciplines like the humanities, sociology, and psychology. And so what has happened to some extent with these academic disciplines is they've hothoused themselves, like they've argued amongst themselves with these ideas, a little bit like what happened to the Freudian and Jungian psychoanalysis. They started to, behaviorism took over from psychoanalysis to some extent. There was a change in the zeitgeist because they recognized that, well, what they were talking about mostly was literature and philosophical ideas that had some truth in Freud.
Yeah, behaviorism.
But it wasn't science. It wasn't science. Once you uncouple yourself from empiricism and direct observation in terms of your constructs, you start to wander off we can wander off in any direction, multiple directions.
Correct.
So I think that essentially is the heart of the issue, that you can't really call it research anymore. So you can call it literature. You can do gender studies and call it literature or some type of ethics or some type of philosophy, but I don't think you can call it research.
Yeah, they call it, sometimes they'll say action research. I think which just is a fancy way of saying that this doesn't universalize, it's not generalizable, it's highly hyper-localized. But I think that the key in understanding these disciplines is that they promote moral ideas, and that it's what Sokal calls fashionable nonsense. So there are morally fashionable ideas, and if you want to publish a paper in a journal in which that goes against the zeitgeist, it's almost impossible. And so what we have is this is funny that this is actually a postmodern notion in of itself. We have a funneling, like a reality tunnel. We have a funneling of domains of thought that are untethered to reality. They're kind of floating out there, but they're extremely well layered upon themselves. It's just speaking on a podcast the other day about this. It's kind of like this guy, when I was in the New Atheist movement, I read all this stuff. N.T. Wright, he's astonishing exegesis of the Bible and the resurrection of Jesus. But it's all kind of built upon other people who have these experiences. And it's just like layers of madness. It's just like an architectonic structure of delusion, of mass delusion. And so what we have in these fields are morally fashionable nonsense. It's ideologuing, to borrow that term phrase, and they're not only informing public policies, but when you look at the society and you look at the madness that we see now, it's because entire generations of people, certainly a full generation, probably a full generation and a half, depending on how you want to parse it, have been taught by ideologues. They've been taught that certain moral impulses that these ideologues have had are true. They're tested on articles and journal materials, and then they get out, and I think Peterson said, 5 to 7 years later, something like that, but roughly 5 years, then they, not only do they go in the workplace, but they ascend in managerial capacity, administrative duty, or what have you. And the consequence of that is that they then institutionalize what they've been taught in schools because they think it's true, but it's not true. It's total bullshit. It's completely untethered to reality.